Good afternoon. My name is Colin Hatcher. I'm a graduate student in Liberty University's Industrial Organizational Psychology program. Industrial Organizational Psychology, which will be referred to from here on out as IO Psychology, is a study of how employees work in the workplace and how individuals perform together as a group and behave in group settings, and how that benefits the organization and enhances the organization's effectiveness. Early studies, such as the Hawthorne studies in the early 1900s, sought to determine if environmental changes in the workplace could improve that efficiency, that worker efficiency. They changed the lightings, but what they found was that any novel change to the environment would actually increase efficiency. This sparked a revolution in thought, and employers and managers alike sought to adjust the workers' environment to make it better for them and thereby increase efficiency of the organization. A major historical event that happened was the September 11th terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center and the other locations in 2001. The biggest aspect of change that this brought about was an intense focus on emergency preparedness in organizations. Up to this point, organizations had really just been clicking right along, but this really brought out that everyone is sort of vulnerable, so we need to have items in place. How do employees work together to push the safety forward? It brings an entire safety aspect to it. With times like that, if workers aren't feeling safe, they're not going to perform as well as they could. They will be inundated with stressors, and stressors are things that employers need to be on the lookout for, whether they're internal to the organization or external to the worker's personal life. Eliminating stressors as much as possible, creating benefits and policies for the employees can help enhance their productivity. Another very recent historical event was the Great Recession in the early 2008. This was massive. This brought about feelings of unease about finding jobs, money issues, financial issues, but most interestingly is that research based on those who remained employed actually found that employment insecurity rose. So not only are we dealing with unemployment rates that are rocketing through the roof, those who are remaining employed feel insecure in their jobs. That's what we found. This brought in new stressors. Stressors about, my job's not going to be here forever, because maybe they're moving jobs overseas for cheaper employment and thereby cheaper products, and thereby more products to be sold. And the key takeaways from this research is that macroeconomics don't just affect those who lost their jobs, but also those who kept their jobs. And managers need to understand that, leaders and CEOs need to understand that just because they feel that their organization is going to do well during times of economic downturns, their employees may not feel the same way, and it's going to bring in more stressors to their lives. Additionally, a secondary effect would be their family members. Maybe they have a spouse who has lost a job, so now the bills are getting crunched. The finances aren't as tight, or are more tight. They're not as easily come by as they previously were. So managers need to have an open communication with their employees and help them mitigate these stressors as much as possible. So I hope that answered a couple of questions about how historic events have led the research in industrial organizational psychology. The next question that was brought up was about the socialization and the onboarding process for new employees into the organization. I've been working here for a little while, so I can understand the amount of stress that comes with having a new job and the amount of uncertainty. You don't understand the social unwritten rules. You don't quite understand who to go to for information. You don't quite understand how you fit into these new teams. And sometimes you don't understand where to go for information. The current socialization process for newcomers in this organization, to be fair, leaves a lot to be desired. Upon notification that a member will be transferring to this organization, they're assigned a sponsor. And the sponsor is there to help set them up with housing in the area, help them find the schools that they're zoned into, give them a tour of the facilities, and introduce them to certain key players. However, what we found is that that last part doesn't happen as often as we would like. They're given about 2 weeks or 3 weeks of on-the-job training, and then because of manning issues, they are let out into the wild alone. They have to use their previous knowledge and try and find information. Now, this depends on the person. If you have a very extroverted individual, they may be more willing to make these social connections in the workplace and be able to find the information they need, but more introverted individuals will likely recluse into their own selves and work without some vital information, and sometimes they don't even know that's information that they need to have. In this current paradigm, the socialization ends at the onboarding process, and the onboarding process goes from intake up through that final certification on the training. Socialization as a philosophy needs to extend further, perhaps 6 months, a year, and however long it feels for that individual. Honestly, it's a constant. It should be a constant practice. In this organization, a way that could be better to create that socialization for the newcomers and to create that job embeddedness would be perhaps to use that idea of the sponsor, where the sponsor brings them in for the intake, and use that and adapt it and assign mentors. You can identify key mentors who are able to then take that employee on after they finish that onboarding process, and then show them the ropes that extend past the training and certification process. This could be introducing them to peers that they may get along with. This could be introducing them to other members of other departments that they'll be working hand in hand with, and establishing that contact so that the searching for information isn't as difficult as it could be. Additionally, that mentor can direct the mentee to social networks. They can keep them abreast of any morale events or family events that the organization may be having, and they can really be that linchpin in the success for the employees' job embeddedness. The job embeddedness comes from having the skills, knowing where to find the knowledge, understanding the role that you play in the organization, as well as understanding that your family is going to be taken care of due to family-friendly policies that are advertised, and additionally, embedding into social networks within the organization. Peer support groups are extremely important. So restructuring the way the support team embeds the departments is necessary to provide the workers a chance to attach themselves to teams that they work with, and in turn, better socialize these newcomers. The next question that was given to me prior to coming here is a big one, and it's a big one that a lot of organizations are struggling with. It's how can an organization reduce or prevent work-family conflict? This is an idea, and this is a question that is constantly evolving. Well, if we think about it generationally, we have the baby boomers, we have Generation X. Baby boomers were born to parents who were in World War II. When they came back, there was a massive explosion of births. Their children were Generation X. Their children are the millennials, and their children are in the generation just below that, just after that, are the Generation Z. These generations are all different, from interests and hobbies to how they fill their time outside of work. But really, one of the bigger differences is how they perceive jobs and careers. The older generations tend to look at jobs more as ways to provide for their families. And this is very typical of baby boomers and previous generations. It didn't really matter about job satisfaction as much, more that they could act as the provider for the family. Additionally, as we move through the generations, motherhood and fatherhood roles are starting to become more entwined. So no longer do we have these father as the sole provider and breadwinner for the family, and mother as primary caregiver and homemaker. A lot of times we're seeing that mothers are the primary breadwinners, and fathers sometimes are actually staying home. There's a great mix between these two. So the work-family conflict has a lot of wiggle room in this aspect, and organizations need to be very aware of just how their employee demographics are comprised. For instance, the old paradigm of how can I support my family with my work is now shifting, especially with the newer generations, those who are about 18 to about 24 years old, Generation Z, just entering the workplace. They are looking more of how can I support my lifestyle, not only with money from work, but also the time off from work. And additionally, can I find purpose and meaning in my work? That is becoming much, much more popular among the younger generations. Key factors that organizations need to understand to help their employees feel that they are getting this a very good work-family balance is instituting family-friendly policies. Now, family-friendly policies may already be a thing in your organization. In this instance, they need to be a little more maybe advertised or championed by first-line supervisors and managers. Just the sole existence of family-friendly policies may not actually lead to a work-family balance or enrichment like we would want. Sometimes there's a culture in some organizations that it is frowned upon to take action on these. For instance, maybe in the military, for instance, you are given 30 days of leave every year. That's 2.5 days per month. And in some units, it's frowned upon due to the workload and the management stresses to not be able to take maybe 2 weeks at a time, which will be about half of a year's leave for vacation, taking sick days when you need. There need to be ways in most organizations to be able to broaden and level out the workload so that individuals can take that time off so that they feel that work is not consuming their entire lives. We want to go from work-family conflict to work-family balance and work-family enrichment. Enrichment is the goal, and that's where our feelings at work, our feelings of accomplishment, the skills we're learning, such as time management, can actually bleed over into our personal lives. We can use time management in our personal lives. We can take that good day's sense of worth and accomplishment and bleed it into our relationships with our kids and with our spouses. The ideal here is that all parties win, and it is a balance. You still have to have the work completed, you still have to produce and be efficient in the organization, but you can't let that occur at the expense of a good family support system. And it's not just for good feelings and well-being all around. Employees who feel that they have a very rich family life in addition to their work life are going to be more productive and satisfied and helpful and constructive employees in the work center. So my team has been tasked to review the employee assessment program and perhaps suggest some techniques that we could use to adequately evaluate employee performance as comprehensively as possible. Now, the first step in creating a performance assessment is going to be determining the actual standards and expectations of each level of employee. This is typically seen in a job description. However, it's very important that whatever that employee is expected to do is actually in the job description. These are the standards and expectations that they will be measured against amongst their peers, and the levels of performance that they will be graded to reach. So a few things we need to talk about these goals is, are they clearly stated? Does each employee understand how they contribute? And when we're evaluating them, are employee responsibilities and duties evaluated fairly according to these objectives? And are they evaluated fairly amongst their peers? Looking at Campbell's model of job performance, we can actually break down the aspects of an employee's job performance. So what does that all entail? We have job-specific task proficiency, non-job specific task proficiency. So job-specific is exactly what they're expected to do in their position. Non-job is what a lot of employees around them, or maybe all employees, are expected to do. Their written and oral communication is the next one. How well they are able to effectively communicate to other people. They're demonstrating of effort. How much effort do they give? Are they coming in and just doing the job? Are they going just a little bit more above and beyond? Because going above and beyond shows that they've bought in. They're embedded. They're ready to give to the company to see it succeed. How well do they maintain personal discipline? And this goes through, as I mentioned earlier, their appearance, their off-duty habits, such as illicit drug use, perhaps alcohol abuse. Are they getting the treatment that they possibly need as far as mental health, such as illicit drug use, perhaps alcohol abuse? Are they getting the treatment that they possibly need as far as mental health? And also, going back to the previous question, are those resources available to them should they need? Next is, how do they facilitate team and peer performance? Are they looking out just for themselves, or are they looking out for their team as a whole? Do they want to see the team win? Because these are the people that we want to evaluate higher and perhaps get into in higher progressive levels. Next is supervision and leadership. What characteristics are they showing? What initiative and how well are they respected among their peers to get these initiatives done? And finally, management and administration. How well do they upkeep their records? Are they on time with deadlines? Are they filing reports in the correct manner? Are they ensuring that there are proper channels and resources available to their team so that they can bring in reports and stats and data, and that everything is nice and tight? And that's really that is indicative of good personal discipline too. So it's all kind of tied together. Once we have the job performance standards all lined up and broadcast and advertised, we want to look at how the organization rates these individuals against their peers. Especially, do we want to make a culture where people are fighting for the next level, or do we want to create a culture of development and progression? If we're keeping these individuals around for a while, we're investing time in them, we're investing resources. So how do we create a culture that develops the employee, which will inevitably make them a better employee for us down the road, making our organization a better place? The more standardized the assessment can be across the organization, the more equitable it should be. Raters must also be trained to accomplish these reviews in a very fair and equitable way, almost in a blind manner to demographics. We're looking at just strictly job performance. In addition to establishing a marker for an employee's development and progression, this is also a chance to coach an employee and guide them in the direction that benefits them as well as the organization. And finally, we want to talk about organizational constraints. Specifically, we want to talk about how organizational constraints can lead to counterproductive work behaviors. Organizational constraints can take the form of time and materials not being available, required services and help from others, the work environment, transportation, and perhaps even job-related authority. These constraints are very likely to lead to other behaviors in the employee that are not as beneficial, and we call these counterproductive work behaviors. A really good useful model to understand how these constraints can lead to counterproductive behaviors is Spector's model of the impact of locus of control on the relationship between frustration and counterproductive behavior. I know that's a mouthful to say, but essentially it's a model that looks at constraints feeding into feelings of frustration, and then from there it can go one of two ways. If the employee feels like they have a lack of control in the work environment, it could lead to destructive behaviors. However, if they have these constraints, these feelings of frustrations because of the constraints, but they feel that they have a high degree of control in the work center, that can actually lead to productive behaviors. So if you have an employee who feels like they have a good bit of control, they can see these constraints as obstacles to overcome and opportunities to make their work organization better. Constraints are going to happen. It's just the nature of it, whether that be crunching deadlines, just not having the right time and materials due to budgetary constraints. So we need to look at how much control we can give the employees. How much initiative can they take from this? How much authority do they have to innovate in their environment? Supervisors and management must remain aware of possible constraints and work to alleviate them. That's our job. Our job is to facilitate the main production workers. We need to facilitate their work environment. We need to give them the resources and time as much as possible, and give them the standards, give them the job description. Nothing needs to be ambiguous. It all needs to be very clear and concise, so that everyone knows exactly what they're doing and that they know how they're leading into that organizational vision. If we can work to eliminate as many of these constraints as possible, that's just going to make our organization work more effectively. So I hope this gave you a little insight into some of the questions that were asked of my team and I in IO psychology. We're mainly working to just make this place work smoother, work more efficiently, make the lives of both employers and employees better. Trying to figure out how we can balance work and family. We're looking at how to make ratings fair and how to possibly, to the extent possible, eliminate constraints. So thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'll hang around for a few more minutes. Thank you.